I can't say that I'm a grand. You heard me before in my fuddy-duddyism talking about my not being such a fan of today's music, and it's funny because um, the agendas. There was a time when music was music, and we didn't need to know the foibles of the artist. We didn't need to know how messy the artist was. And what we really sort of lashed onto was just it was good music. And I can say that comfortably. I grew up in the ages of Prince and Michael Jackson. So you got stuck in some of the stuff that we didn't really need to know about because Michael Jackson wasn't telling us that stuff. It was people prying into his life that wanted to tell this stuff to us. It would have been very difficult to listen to his music if you thought that sincerely he was a pedophile. Uh, and Prince changed, if not religions, every other week.
Names,
Sure.
symbols.
You didn't know if his name was Prince or
The thing was, yeah.
they changed it back once people realized you can't really say it. Oh,
Somebody didn't have a name.
okay, sure.
What did you say, Daniel?
Very hard.
Not very wonderful.
Now we live in an age where people need to take their agendas and throw them at us and say, you need to accept not only my music, but you need to accept me too. So hopefully you've not been surprised by perhaps somebody you all admire, or somebody you admire, David Archuleta. So it sounds like you haven't encountered his recent article.
No.
Okay. So want to talk a little bit about Archuleta's article? And you know Archuleta, he's from
Yeah.
American Idol,
Mhm.
about 2000.
Quite a while. He was like a kid. Yes.
16 years old when he and what we learned post that is that he was part of the Mormons, right? And then soon after he was, I think, third or fourth in that on that show at that time, he started producing Christian music, which a lot of folks listened to. And so we learned in an article that David Archuleta put out, my dear. So we've learned that David Archuleta is not quite sure if he's LGBTIQA or plus, but he's in there. He's in there. And one of the things that we learned is that he, I guess, talked to his parents in 2014 to tell them that he was one of the LGs or Ts, something like that. But since then, he's had to kind of negotiate and understand he's not really necessarily an LG, but he could be B or T or Q or I or A plus or something. But he wants the world to recognize that he is on this spectrum. And he wants you to continue to enjoy his music, but also to search your hearts to realize. Okay, see, why are you chuckling inside?
Yes, that is directly so. Like, why should I care?
But additionally, his bet was more towards the religious community to be accepted.
That's what he says. He says that he should be able to be gay and still be a Christian, have his faith in God. Not Christian is the right word. He's bisexual. He's a spectrum of bisexual, is what he says on here. Whatever that means. Wow.
You know if you're as flummoxed, and young people, I don't know if you're as flummoxed as I am. I don't get it. Here's the thing. If you're on the spectrum, what do you say you're on the spectrum? It's like it's
Spectrum now is a different thing than what it was a couple of months ago.
It's like people used to keep sexual things kind of personal and within your own household. It didn't actually get advertised out to the world at large. And now it seems like, hey, you need to know this about me and what I did last night and who I was with last night. And that's, well, apparently your definition of cool is not the same as mine.
Yeah.
They were giving she giving you that one.
No, the young people do care.
Correct. And you're right about it.
But
You're right about it. Because it's cool. But you heard Steve quoting this passage that Jesus states, and it's a simple thing. And this has kind of got to be, guys, your yardstick to be able to use. When you hear people saying crazy or doing crazy, how can you call me Lord when you refuse, I'm paraphrasing, they refuse to do the things that I've told you to do? So when Christian put in the slack line this week, he put in that interesting component about homosexuality. It's not in the Bible. The word's not in the Bible, but neither is the word
Pedophilia.
future.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? There's a lot of words that aren't really in the Bible, but the concept is clearly explained and alluded to. And that discussion was a good one. So this is why one of the assignments that you have this year, Christian, you got to read through the big old book. You got to read through the big old book because it's going to inform you to help you know. It says several times, don't do, don't do, don't do. And here's the thing. It's not a book of don't do. It's a book of I love you. This is what's best for you. Stay away from stupid. That's the best way I can paraphrase that. And I will tell you, the thing is, if the Lord didn't have a problem with sexual proclivity, he would have blown up 2 cities. It's the only punishment because we have to know your sexual inclination. The Lord blowed up 2 cities for that. I would suggest that's pretty doggone serious. And I would think that the more comfortable we get needing to tell people what goes on in our bedroom, the kinky and the weird, the more we're going to get away from understanding that in this book, which is the foundation of us saying we believe in Jesus, we're violating that. And I don't know how you can make it any simpler to say, except we've got a group of folks driving the bus who are the younger people now, and the minority of folks saying, this is what's cool, this is what's popular. If you don't get on this bus, you're canceled. You're unimportant. You're a dinosaur.
Plus, you could spend a whole month celebrating it.
It's true. The president or the ventriloquist who's currently in the office. Well, this is on video.
Exactly. It's not the ventriloquist. He's the dummy being controlled by the ventriloquist.
Sorry, he just
This is recorded.
that there should be a spot that's a national monument. Have you all heard?
Have not heard that yet.
Oh, that's one of mine.
Yes.
For what?
Pride one, pride. Whatever. The alphabet.
That was in Florida last year.
Oh yeah, that's right.
He's having to present a bill, or he's going to present a suggestion that becomes a national monument.
Like monuments. Not exactly, that's my thought.
Like
No, I'm talking about
monuments.
monuments that
For today.
that had that Confederacy. Yes. Yes.
It's
If the mass shooter did it because of his Islamic faith. We can't throw the Muslims under the bus. Memorialize it on.
we haven't thought it that far.
Oh, okay.
Because what probably is the inclination here is that it represents Pride Month, right? Because of the character of the club, and so we're going to memorialize that situation.
So why does this alphabet group, I love the alphabet group, get a month, yet our soldiers only get really 2 days a year?
Oh, but you get 10% discounts at those.
Oh, great. Okay, great. There you go.
There's a couple of them. Don't get
But still, it's well, but okay. So, well, yeah, I was just saying, I was saying the ones that we celebrate, kind of, sort of. The Memorial Day.
well, you're gonna
Yeah, because
we don't know the
but these aren't necessarily nationally recognized things, right? Unfortunately. And, it's like these men and women have fought for the very freedoms that the alphabet group has. Okay, sorry. I'm sorry. Sorry.
appreciate.
Sorry.
That's the kind of
That's where my husband has gotten me in the last year.
passion that we need to be able to impact and change.
It's
You see silly and stupid and it just makes sense going on. I don't address it.
Well, have you heard the new term? Biden administration talking about birthing people.
Have you not heard this?
Birthday.
Okay, so Daniel, why do you? That's-
It can't gotta be a person.
It's birth in person, because it's no longer,
It can't be just a woman.
So that's
I told him, I'm just gonna try this and happy birthday.
because
I would just
maybe
fun.
transgender or something like.
What definition is that for what I'm asking? Male and female. Like one who has characteristics commonly associated to that gender. Not that like, you know, physiologically, but like
Characteristics.
Why? There's no using birthing person in a place of mothers.
My law, she's a nurse, and to be pretty,
Nothing.
nothing. Nobody cares.
seeing her.
Sperm donors.
The you had doctors or whatever
Yeah.
before, that they should change the name manager to manager to people leader.
Are you serious? Wow.
That's what you got walked out of the room.
So,
The mandate's gonna be called.
Ah, little person.
What are mandates gonna be called? That's governing business. Mangoes.
look, there's some things that people in our culture make some changes that aren't gonna change. Here's one. The medical profession,
Hebrews.
the medical profession is not gonna change, being able to understand men and women. Because if you come in to be operated, your title or your flavor is not gonna help them be able to address your needs. They're gonna need to know biologically
What you would.
how the Lord put you together.
Mhm.
And right now, the insurance companies, although they're covering things, still wanna know, is you a man or is you a woman?
But you know what? It's coming out now because we've actually got, okay, so we've got a change request in for our auto rates, because auto rates, gender, age, marital status, what you drive your car for, right?
Sure.
They're now taking the gender part out of it. They're working on actually undoing all of this and then I'm like going, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? And some of the applications for things now he filled an application out last week for something and it says gender assigned at birth. I remember that.
Correct.
Yes, it did. It said gender assigned at birth. I was just like, oh, I'm sure.
Everyone.
Yes,
Well,
women.
this is neighbors.
Yes, the women are going to be impacted now because typically your females have the lower insurance rates because they tend to be a little more conscientious of things, less accidents. They still have accidents, but less accidents. Right. So now when they take out the gender part of it, now you're going to throw women into the whole men thing, which is going to totally be just disproportionate against women.
Are they gonna average them? And raise the women's rates and lower the.
Yep. Yep. Everything's going to be the same now. So, it's no longer giving you a benefit, an advantage over because of the way that you bring things, the way that God made you think, so yeah,
Everybody would have a boy that are 16 or 17 and driving benefits, but everybody who has girls does not.
that would be correct.
Things like intersectionality,
Mhm.
because this kind of thing is gonna create victimization of ladies, right? Because you're gonna lose certain privileges because of how you're built. That it may also come into play with insurance. If for instance, ladies' insurance rates are typically, they're lower now, and we're not talking about auto insurance, life insurance.
Yes.
They've been historically lower, but they've actually been climbing up because guys are living less than their wives.
Yeah.
So
They even do.
the intersectionality is one of these new terms that's helping to highlight who the victim is. And the crazy that's going on right now, folks. Please look, you need to be aware of what's in here, but you need to be aware culturally of what's around you so you can enter the argument and not be accused of not knowing what's going on. Not when we spend some time talking about this, and certainly after spending a week in Portland, there's even a show Portlandia. If you want to see Crazy on Display, if you want to see a show with a little Crazy on Display, watch an episode or two of Portlandia. We watched it with our kids and we just went.
Okay, it sounds very
Is
utopian.
it like documentary?
It sounds utopian, but it's crazy. It's crazy. It's utopic and it's crazy.
It probably wouldn't be much different from being a documentary.
They were able to identify with lots of aspects of the presentation. It's almost like if you watched, say, The Office, or Fargo, if you've watched the movie Fargo, Minnesota, a lot of the ways that they operate is kind of indigenous to the folks there, and it kind of gets to be humorous. If you're from Wisconsin, there's certain things you know about Wisconsiners. If you're from New York, et cetera. So Portlandia has some of those elements where people from Portland watch it and go, "Yep, that's how people are." So helping you recognize, folks, that the items that Steve puts in, the conversations that are part of our Slack line, they're for your benefit. You have to know this, but you also need to know what's going on around you, because that's going to help you to be bold enough to have conversations with people that, and I would tell you that you're almost going to have conversations you never thought you would have with a live living person. That's how crazy this world is. And we were just in a land where literally Cole Porter did not recognize when he wrote anything goes. Did anything really go? And it does. And people are proud. People are proud of the cannabis dispensaries. They're proud that, one of the things that they do is they raise cannabis, and cannabis, you can have it in all forms. You can eat it, you can put it in tea, you can smoke it as old fashioned.
And you're July 1.
There you go. Thank you, Governor.
Totally legal all around, around like that.
You can have up to 1 ounce and up to 4 plants per household or per person.
You smoke it, do it.
Well, when it's legal, here's one of the things to concern yourself with, at least in part. You don't know if the driver next to you is there. So it becomes kind of the norm that it's okay. Look, it's not okay for folks to drunk drive, right? It's not okay for folks to do that. But now you truly don't know if somebody's been lighting up and they're tailgating you or vice versa.
I mean, especially in Oregon, like, I was surprised when they legalized a certain amount of hard drugs. It was like, that's a pretty decent amount of it too, like 5 grams.
Oh, yeah. I think our kids were saying you'd be caught with 5 grams, not 5 grams.
That's a lot.
That's cash.
Yeah.
That's thanks.
You might get robbed, but you're not gonna arrest you.
Take it from someone. They're in Oregon, right now.
So guys,
Legal,
no,
legal.
no, try to know what foundationally your faith is about, because it's going to be challenged on all fronts. And if you get into the mindset that you want to be liked, you want to be popular, you want to be not ostracized, well, then it's real easy for you to be an undercover Christian. And that doesn't mean that, you're not going to spend eternity in heaven. But here's what's going to mean. You basically are hiding your light under a bush. You're not letting your light so shine before men that they can see your good works and glorify your Father who's in heaven. That's not what we're called to do. Look, the other thing about the times in which we're living is it's going to get harder and harder to do this. And that's what we talk about. You got to build up your muscle now. You got to build up the muscle memory now while it's not illegal. It's coming soon to a state near you.
Right now, you can do some things, but if you try to walk the areas that surround us, you watch what's going on in Canada right now. There are pastors that are being arrested because they're having church. There's a pastor who the police showed up without a warrant to shut down his service. He kicked him out of his church, and then they found him on the road and pulled him over and arrested and drug him off. That's Canada, right? There was a political opponent of Trudeau who went to a meeting, and he got pulled over and arrested because he was at a political. It's too many people.
Yep.
Just coincidental that he has to be treated right. Sure. But again, First Amendment, they don't really have it yet. People forget that. We're the only country on earth that has the freedom of speech. Correct. Really?
Oh, I know, but it's almost like you don't have it anymore.
I'm still
We do, but it's
Canada, you don't even have because of hate speech law. You can tell the truth in Canada, but if the truth is offensive to somebody else, they can still classify it as hate speech. Correct. Then you can get arrested for it.
we saw a video yesterday, and the guy made a great comment. He said there's a difference between hate speech and speech that you hate.
Yes.
Yes, definitely.
The speech that you hate
It's not.
typically what permeates today's era.
Yes, that's not hate speech. It's you just may not like what somebody said because you don't agree with them.
Because you can't define who gets to the money.
That's how it tells you folks we're a far cry from the America of the founding of the framers. We're a far cry from men who may not have believed in Jesus, but operated in Judeo-Christian procedures in order to establish what would be valued in this country. So, believers, gird your loins, get yourselves ready. Tough times. And I would tell you, being in a very silly way, that it would be nice if the Lord comes back, because then those of us who are really authentic and genuine believers are probably gonna have to deal with the jump. But more likely, it ain't gonna happen that way. So, get yourself ready. Yes, sir.
Seems like to me that a combination of things is gonna culminate in a insurance rate wash.
Okay.
Where it might go down because gender becomes a non-factor.
Sure.
It's gonna go back up because there'll be an increase in accidents because of impaired driving.
Right.
So it'll wash it.
Yeah, but at the same time, what occurs in it going back up is not gonna work for ladies who historically, if you're a young man, I remember, years ago that my insurance coming out of my parents' house was like $2,000 a year. It may be more now than unless you're mom and dad's insurance, I have my own policy. I think it's crazier now. Ladies typically pay hundreds less to drive
A
on
lot
policy.
less.
Yeah, but if the state of Virginia begins to experience a marked increase in accidents because people are driving stoned, then there'll be a new stone law or something.
Well, they got to pass the cost on to everybody at that point in time.
Exactly my point. So there's the law.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we're gonna have unknown categories coming up, folks, in the next generation. Things like, if Jeff Bezos was our visionary for our time, it's Elon Musk. And so there's gonna come a time very soon, folks, when there are things that are delivered without a human driver. There's gonna be someone, if not piloting a drone, somebody doing something else, and then
The Instacarts now that you see on TV, nobody somehow ends up on your front porch, but
Yeah.
nobody's driving it.
Yeah.
I'm sure you have, because they do. They actually do. So at Liberty, they do have a little robot thing, right? That parents can actually order something, and I think you can send food to your kid. Yeah, and they'll stick this little robot thing, and you get a code, and they go out there, they put the little code in and get their food out. I saw that, yeah. I've seen it at the medication. Yep, the medication dispensary type things. Yeah, that was like new this year, the past year or so. And now because of the increase in the minimum wage, a lot of your fast food restaurants are now going to replace them with your automated ordering to have fewer people in there. What a menu. Yeah. And people don't understand that what they're doing is actually hurting people more than helping them. When you call and can't get a person, I get mad.
There are going to be categories of injury that right now we haven't been able to fathom, because we're not aware of where the technology in this society is going. And that's partly what Steve tries to help us to do, is stay on top of the changing weird that's going to go on. That Christian, we're going to be less influential if we act like we're living in the 1700s trying to preach about Jesus. We need to live in the 2100s, and we need to tell people we understand what's going on in the society. And just because we know it doesn't mean we go along with it. Because Jesus' principles, Yahweh's desire for us, is timeless and unchanging. And we need to understand how that meets with the societal norms that are in some ways not complementary to what the Word of God.
And don't be afraid to go outside mainstream media, because that's where that's where Steve finds a lot of that information, because mainstream media doesn't necessarily give you the whole story. They give you their bent on it.
Just thinking, I think I said it in the first, so it came from the slide. But it's like, it's not like Christians haven't dealt with this kind of stuff before. Like it's not like it's a new thing. Like there's been multiple things and cultures that they've dealt with. Multiple genders too, or sexuality being rampant. It's not like it's a new thing. Like it's not like it's just today we're done with it.
2,000 years ago, when the world was full of the Hellenic influence of the Greeks.
The Greeks and Romans probably practiced it.
Commitment of the people who said that they were committed to Jesus was those people turned a Western world around that had practices that even included bestiality and other stuff that's unfathomable, to the point where, unfortunately, during the Dark and the Middle Ages, then sex became something not highlighted, not illuminated, something very, very private. And some of that, unfortunately, and I say this hopefully with the right understanding, some of that funneled to the Puritans who helped to establish this country, and they took all the joy and all the fun out of not only sex, but in some ways, life. And so the prudishness of our morality stems from those guys, where they got a lot right. No, they got a lot wrong for the right reason. They cared and they loved Jesus, but they sucked all the fun out of intimacy, out of sex, out of dancing, out of those sort of things. And so no society of humans is a perfect one. And guys, that's the argument you have to be ready to make. Because our kids are really quick to talk about that, how Americans are supposed to be better than everybody else. And here's the thing, we are. And it's not that we are because we're superior, it's because from an empire standpoint, we have been more beneficial to the world at large than any other empire that's existed. And that's stuff from a history standpoint, guys, you gotta know. Gotta be able to push that back.
Yeah, because that's the narrative that irritates me the most. Because you hear people like Rashida Tlaib putting stuff out there about how, how many atrocities the United States has committed. And I'm like, well, wait just a second. You find me a nation anywhere on the planet Earth that hasn't committed atrocity. Find me one.
Right.
And then answer this question, then why are you here? Right. You're going to take the country that offers your family refuge, the country that has the freedom that allows you to arrive to the position that you are in, that you would not have restored so long. Allows you to become a representative of their government. And then you get out there, all you want to do is trash the country. That makes me, it's so stupid.
My question is, how much longer can it really last?
The prince of the power of the air is loosed for a little while. So, when you have a George Bush, say George Bush, looking for peace agreement, there's going to be no peace, or what I stand for, until Jesus comes back. So, why am I saying that to you? That's a very great question that Gene's asking, because look, there can be great awakening. Great awakening sometimes is only localized. That might be localized and only for a time. So, gunslingers, Christian gunslingers, you gotta be ready that this may be the climate of the world until Jesus comes back, and it may continue to get worse and worse and worse.
My point though is the country that we knew and that we even know now may cease to exist as things get overthrown and pandemonium really does get unleashed.
So you mean the Empire of the United States?
Exactly.
Okay, so Steve and I used to muse about that a lot. We've already, and guys, sorry that we're boring you with history stuff, but it's important to know your history to kind of understand how we got where we are. America has been an empire in power for longer almost than any other empire. So we've already exceeded the time of the Germans, of the Greeks, the time of the Romans, the time of the Assyrians, the time of the Babylonians. We've already succeeded that. And so what typically happens with those empires is they implode.
That's right.
And that's what we see right now. We're seeing the implosion from a society that's been on top for longer than 200, 250 years.
Borrowed time.
Yes, sir. And that's what believers, you got to recognize the greatness of this country. It's counted on you. You need to fight hard for that, in addition to fighting for the ideals of the Lord, because America has already met its time in terms of being a world power, a world influence.
I understood, heard, been some time ago now, like probably a decade, that the average lifespan of a democracy is like 200 years.
Giving democracy, because we've had no real democracies.
That's what they said. The
Mm-hmm.
democracy,
Our constitution.
Right, republic and empire, because America has been the first real democracy. I mean, Greece was founded as a democracy, but it wasn't. It was more a republic.
they were saying, you know,
Correct.
decades ago that I heard that. And at that point, we were already beyond the 200 years. So, yeah, we're on borrowed time,
I
basically.
mean, people in America are like, they're really lucky and they don't really know because America has gone the longest for longer than based off other countries, it's gone the longest longer than it should have.
Right.
And not only has it gone longer than it should have, it's had relative stability over other countries ever. Like we've only had one constitution, and France has had like 16 of the 50 years. Like people don't understand how good it is to live in America.
Well, some students don't even know what a constitution is.
Well, we don't teach them.
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
So
They're like-
the socioeconomic culture stuff. This is the world that you're inheriting. Some of us are going to be deceased at least over the next 40 years. This is going to be your planet. You need to know this stuff. And knowing your history in many ways can help you avoid repeating stupid. So our message to our kids, in addition to the fact that we're always going to continue to pray for them, is there's not a lot of junk you can tell us until you travel the rest of the world. Unfortunately, we've got kids who are doing that, but want to do that. And you need to go other places outside of this country before you start pointing fingers at the United States in a way that says you know what you're talking about. So that's our challenge to our kids, with folks that have that kind of background. In a lot of ways, what they say to us is, we're rubber, you're glue. Whatever you say bounces off of us and sticks to your silliness. Because until you go to Africa, until you go to even Japan, until you go to China, you can't appreciate what it is here in America to be able to say something about one of your leaders, and no one comes to hang you in Richmond City. Tiananmen Square, and that reality is frightening. Kim Jong-un is a scary reality. If you look at him the wrong way, you may, and your entire family could be dead the next day. That is not this place. And so he's still alive. And the rumors of his being dead and
Greatly exaggerated.
thank you for sure.
Oh, you're talking.
Oh, yeah, North Korea and good old China.
China is basically what they scrub all references to Tiananmen Square.
Because they've become a power.
Scrub it. Like,
Yes.
you can't like if you're in China and you try to cover some history of Tiananmen Square, you couldn't find the internet.
Mhm.
You see that you have to have a celebration where they like candles. Outlaw that. They went so far as to remove the candle emoji from their iPhones.
Okay.
People out there. It's going to be funny watching.
Again, it sounds boring, but you're talking
No.
folks about a country that literally controls the internet and the news in a way that's more latent than the news that's controlled for you here. So when you get on the internet in China, they only allow you a certain access to the internet. They know who you are, what sites you're looking at, and if you decide you're going to jailbreak and go outside and access it differently, you will have representatives of the Chinese government come to your house. And Kim Jong-un does this regularly to the point where it is overt and it is a regular standard in practice.
So you can't get your own VPN up there, and but you'll be caught. Interesting. Interesting.
And want to force people to do this. Sure. And they think nothing about giving you hard labor, not killing you. So guys, America has a greatness, and it's almost like, and I can't remember, I always should remember him. America was great as long as America was good. We're becoming less good. That's why we started today. This way. And the goodness only comes from why callest me good. There is none good but the Father. So, good morning. You had some questions that were in the slack line from last week, and those questions I want us to talk about because that's going to help us close out these last three verses that have to do with hero worship and hero worship going on. So, first question: what was that posed in there? And there it is on the big screen. It says, "Is it okay to be tested by fellow believers?" So, one of the things I did say to you is, or maybe I said to you, and it got somebody going. I don't know, why would you say that? I'm going to suggest very strongly to you that the young prophet was being tested by the older prophet. In a sincere way, but mostly I would also say in a selfish way.
Interesting. It's almost like he was trying to put him in a bad light
Yeah.
to kind of discredit him,
Yes.
maybe.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yes. So the question there that's a little different than just the text we're using is it okay to be tested by fellow believers? So what did you write? What did you think? Because I know you've all done your homework and you've been shopping for 2 weeks to share this.
So when you say tested,
Yeah.
give me a definition of what you mean by tested. I just want to make sure we're on the same page with you.
Remember, Gene says, I know Jesus. I love him.
Mm-hmm.
I either have interactions with Brother Gene or we go to places in some ways where his belief or what it is that he said to me is put on the spot or on display.
Then yes, it's okay. Because if somebody tests you, you're going to get stronger in your beliefs and understanding of where you're coming from to help you. And if you don't quite measure up to where you think you are, it's going to help you figure out where you need to study and where you need to be better. Okay, I think you're looking at me funny.
No. I'm going to how loquacious you are. It's the light.
Okay, I'm shutting up.
You heard what the moderator the technical facilitator has to say. What say of you to that?
I think it depends on your motivation.
Okay.
Okay. And I don't disagree.
Mhm.
Okay. I think she's spot on. So long as your motivation is the strengthening of the other individual, as long as your motivation is improvement of the body as a whole. But if your motivation is to try to get somebody else to trip up, I don't think that's appropriate.
Okay. I like what you have to say. And I'll also add to you, I think another good motivation might be this one. Sometimes I need to know if you're for real. And that may be just for me. That may have, and I would say indirectly, that's about strengthening the body. But sometimes I need to know if you're for real. Because a lot of us professed believers are sincerely talking a lot, but we don't know how to walk the talk, but we talk the walk.
Yeah, well, see, and this is to give the movie reference, okay? Terminator. Dogs was the test of someone coming into the the sanctuary, if you will, to find out whether or not they were real or not. And with all of what we just discussed with the socioeconomic and political world we're in, there's going to be some need probably to test people to make certain that there is a validity there. And this is the same thing Paul encountered when he goes in, hey, I'm a believer now. And then they go, no, I'm not so sure about that because I heard about what you've been doing in the news and all that. CNN told me you were killing people. All right, so we're not so sure, but we may have to have some of the, trust but verify sort of practice. But yeah, that is a strengthening of the entire body as well. Paul getting excluded, not being ushered in by Barnabas, would have made the body weaker in the first century, but his coming in strengthened us immensely.
Yeah. Other thoughts? Well, we haven't talked enough, so I guess you guys just aren't getting revved up to be able to throw out your thoughts there. Yeah, let me throw this out to you and have you think about this. Do you know that there are folks who are in positions in one church and then they go to another church and then they're in that same position in another church?
It's hardly credible.
Sometimes without being vetted.
And that makes all sorts of sense.
So there's some looks of wonder on your face. So let me make more clear what I'm saying. There's some folks who have been elders or deacons in their churches for several years. So they leave one church and then they go to another church. But when they go to the next church, they tell folks, I used to be a deacon and elder at the last church. So because in some ways they represent and have a stature that appears to be deacon-like or elder-like, eventually they have the same opportunity in the new church to be a deacon or an elder. Okay.
But why did they leave the other church?
Eventually.
I mean, so right.
They moved, doesn't say they moved.
If they just got up and left because something ticked them off, that's not necessarily a good thing. And
Like the color of the carpet.
Somebody wants to question them?
but just because you held a position one place doesn't mean you may really be qualified for it.
Are we speaking of two like-minded bodies?
Sometimes it happens cross-denominationally. Sometimes it can happen where, here, let me just plain potatoes it for you guys. Okay? You go to Goodwill Baptist Church, and you've been there for years, and then you decide you're going to go to Faith Baptist Church, and you've been a deacon and perhaps double deacon and elder over at Goodwill, and you go to Faith Baptist Church, and you become a deacon. Well, you know what? You become an elder. You don't do the deacon stuff. In part because you were already a deacon and an elder someplace else.
But
Yeah.
but shouldn't the other church body have vetted him first, not just take what he did before as the gospel truth?
Well, if he says all the right things, he looks
Yourself.
Yeah, but okay, I could say a lot of things. I can give you the words and you'd be hiring me, right?
Missing something that you're looking at.
I know, I'm trying to,
Well, also think about how many churches can't find people to work.
correct.
They're more than willing to embrace anyone who is willing to work.
Correct.
just because you got a warm body to fill it doesn't make it the right body.
Social restoration.
Listening's appreciating the various things you're saying. So maybe let me ask this question. So does that? We'll get back to that question. So does the situation I just described, does that happen in churches?
Oh, yeah.
Why?
Partly what she said.
Partly what Diane
They
said.
need them, right?
Okay.
What she's saying, they just need
Why else?
people. I don't want to question that.
That's one question.
People can
Well,
really hide a lot of stuff.
Yeah. Yes.
I'm scared of saying anything or
You say
questioning
you're
their procedure.
I'd say you're not.
And if you're questioning that, if you really,
That's
why
fine.
minors?
So then looking back to this silly question, is it okay to be tested by fellow believers?
Yes.
Same like he did, the motive. I mean, if, because you need, if your motive is just to make sure that you're good to be in our church, what if you're not who you say you are, and you're going to start leading people astray and
You may be great for our church, and you guys, this came from three places as we asked this question. Why did the person leave the other church? Here's what's funny. Sometimes when people decide they come to the front of the church and want to join our church, we don't ask them that question. You're sitting in this group today going, why did they leave the other church? But when I've been in, I think maybe even Faith, but I've been in certainly other churches where you have the opening of the doors of the church. Okay? So you can either ask for prayer, you can recommit your life, you can ask to become a believer and have somebody pray with you, or you can ask to join the church. Now, some of you have experienced this, where somebody says, I want to join the church, pastor presents them, right then and there says, how say you on this person joining the church? All in favor, say aye. All opposed? No one says nay. And then that person becomes a member of our local body of believers. No one seems to say, excuse me, why are they here now?
I think the congregation is and maybe wrong, and probably wrongly assuming that the person presenting them has already gone through those steps.
You'd like to think so, but sometimes, how can that happen when you've been maybe attending the church for a bit, you come up and you say to the pastor, I'd like to join the church, and then the church votes on you right then. I'm caught up in the moment though, and I'm really excited that we're supposed to join the church. All in favor? Well, I may not say aye, but you know what? I'm not going to say. So boom, the person's in. I've been a part of that for a lot. I've seen that countless times through my life.
Okay, there's a difference to me, though, if you're talking about just somebody joining the church, you're not talking about joining the staff. So if somebody all their life has been horrible to them, they've been a bad, they've done horrible things and they have lots of repentance. They show up in church for the first time and they go up in there and they want to be a part of the church. That's a good thing though. They're trying to change their life. Just because their past is terrible doesn't mean they're going to continue that way. They're trying to change their ways. So accepting them that way, I don't think is as concerning as it is if you're somebody who's going to be leading the church or running Bible studies or, teaching.
I think typically the scenario you described has something that leads up to it that we sometimes discount.
Yep.
Okay. And sometimes it is the person presenting them says, they've met with the elders and we've evaluated them. We found out why they, are wanting to move the membership, blah, blah, blah. But there's also even if that hasn't happened, sometimes there are groups of people out in the congregation that have become aware of this person, spent some time with them, gotten to know them, and had the answers to their questions brought about. What somebody coming in for the first time, not knowing anybody, and saying, "Hey, I'd like to join the church." I don't know that there's a church on the planet that would say, "Yeah, let's take it."
There's a bunch.
Some church I make you go to a class.
Really?
Churches.
Then that's a mistake.
Probably every
Members equal money, right?
probably every mega church.
Yeah.
Even smaller churches.
Practice. Certainly the method, there's a lot of that practice. I can even tell you the funny thing is, in the Catholic Church, you don't ever have to be a member who says that, and you're considered a member.
Well, and you mentioned mega churches. I don't recall what the process, it's been so long ago, what the process was to become a member of Thomas Road Baptist Church. I don't remember what it was at that point, back in the 70s. But no, megachurch might do that because the pocket of people that might know this person might be proportionally pretty tiny.
Okay. So I'm not getting into the weed with you guys right now, which it could just sort of say, is it okay for somebody to waltz up and say, I'd like to be your friend, or for somebody to say, you had a job opening, I'd like to have that job opening, and you go, are you sincere about that? Yes, I sincerely want it. You're in. So won't do that, although there's some likeness to that, whether it's on staff or whether it's just part of the crew, because sometimes people are becoming a part of the crew because they sincerely like you. They sincerely want to belong to something, but they are also sincerely wrong.
Yeah, and the joke has been over many years. Baptist churches will take people to teach Sunday school who have no understanding of what the Bible is, and maybe haven't read it. And so there's no checking of any sort of understanding or credentials or anything like that when it comes to a Sunday school teacher. And so you really don't know what's being taught, particularly to the younger level. Okay. And you don't know whether or not that's a safe teacher for those kids to have.
You're right.
But we don't care about that. We know respiration and circulation is all we really care about.
Yeah, and
Well, these days now you gotta go background check and criminal fingerprinting and all that before you can even look at kids to try to teach them.
Can't go on a field trip with your kid unless you can do all that stuff.
Exactly.
so we believers practice a litmus test of our own. It's real easy. And folks, look, some of you in this room, you've had this experience. We've served by people for years that claimed that's themselves. And when the tough got going,
So did they.
fine. Because here, let me give you a silly analogy, and then we'll kind of close this question out. But I want to suggest to you that the interaction between the old prophet and the young prophet had a testing component. And the funny thing is, the testing was going from the wrong place to the wrong place. And let me illuminate that before I jump back and give you another picture. The testing should have actually come from the young man of God to the old prophet. He should have used a litmus test to figure out if the old prophet was on target, but he didn't. But the old prophet was using a litmus test toward the young prophet.
Yeah.
Thank you, if you got it. He was using a litmus test because having been a success as an old prophet, he knew that. Think about this now. The young guy said, "I was told by God not to go back to anybody's house, and I was told by God not to eat at anybody's house, not go back to anybody's house, and not to go back the way I came." The old guy says, "Well, interruption in that. Got a new plan for you. But the Lord talked to me and told me this is what you need to do." So we don't know that the old guy has his internet plugged in or has his phone plugged in or whatever, but we know that he gets the information about what happens to the young guy. Immediately, what does he know? Immediately, his phone. He knows even more than that, which is what? When he gets the report of the old guy, of the young guy being dead the way that he is, what does he immediately know?
He didn't know that.
Not necessarily.
No.
Nope. He knows that this prophet is legitimate.
Well, he should have known that when he got the report from his sons, what had already happened.
So he gets a report about that. But see, in the next, he's the guy that says, "Let me muck up the circumstances and see if you don't do what God tells you to do, is there a consequence?" Because he heard about what happened with the withered hand. This, just like Gene kind of said, he was responsible for that. He says the plans change. And when the plans change, God doesn't rain consequences on the young man eventually. He rains consequences almost immediately. And the old prophet knows he's legit.
This is the kind of scenario that kids go through when somebody comes over and says to a kid who's out in the playground, "Your mom told me to take you to get ice cream or something," and the kid's like, "I need to call my mom first."
Yes.
But they're like, "I know your mom," and this is an older person.
Yes.
And so they convince them easily
Yes.
that, "Hey, I know better. I know you're fine."
Yeah.
And then they
Good works.
Yes. And appreciate how he explained this. It's to an older person that's going to give you the right comfort level and says all the right things to make you not do what you need to do to vet and to confirm that the plans have changed.
And our respect our elders thing is kind of
Yes.
is conflict for kids.
Yes.
No, I don't do it at all. But
And we do this as church people, even sometimes not as church people, but we do this in the church, where someone takes us under their wing and they want to guide and they want to show us, but because we're so appreciative, sometimes for what they do, sometimes in terms of money, right? We're appreciative to what they do, sometimes in terms of their experience. Sometimes what we don't do because we want to respect our elders, we don't push back when they tell us the thing that doesn't feel right. And at least for this young guy, this whole changing of the order had to not feel right. But he did go and check. He did test. What he did is he trusted and he did verify. Right? And so his outcome is a direct response to this old guy making the situation different. And when the outcome is the picture of the dead guy, the donkey, and the lion, the old guy, when he gets the news, goes, well, we'll talk about this, because he doesn't necessarily do this right away. He may think, my bad, but he's for real. But either
Yeah.
Successful.
yes.
Yeah.
It's either down.
Two things. Number one, this is almost like the Salem witch trials testing.
Yes.
If you
Good.
saturate the else, like if you bury that, you die.
Yes. And it's times to share the seriousness of the Salem witch trial. This is kind of like this.
And the second thing is, this prophet is, in some senses, and from my perspective, not just testing the ambassador, but testing God's
Yes.
response to
Yes.
disobedience.
Yes. Yes.
Now I know what's gonna happen if I do something like whatever, like that, so, but the leader is gone.
No, the consequences are going to be, but what he knows is that God really sent that young man. And he knows that God's power is still actualized, even if it's not through him. Except it was when he spit out the new prophecy that you gonna die. Okay? But the young man could easily push back on that. And we talked about this before by simply going, excuse me, dude, appreciate hanging out with you, Burt Reynolds. Need to take a break and just, me as a Robert Downey Jr., need to go check with the screen guy. Call off and say, excuse me, Lord Jesus, Yahweh, this dude is saying this. Is he full of macaroni, or do I need to do what he said? And the Lord, who had just responded to him going, can you heal the king's withered arm, would have said, well, I told you to do it. Do that. And so young people, sometimes we glom onto, we admire folks because they take care of us in such a way, and we don't push back when sometimes perhaps our faith is stronger than theirs are. Our faith is stronger than theirs is.
You don't have to be a super young person to do that.
No, because sometimes it actually happens to us when we get more comfortable and more old because we appreciate the person and what they're doing for us more, as opposed to going, no, that's not quite okay. Can't go down that road.
Moral.
All right, comparative. Oh, here, you want older? You like that? Means the same as more old.
I'm sorry. And I end up, skidding every once in a while when you use words wrong. So I don't know what it is about that word.
Well, it's fun. It's like, it's kind of like glue on, but not glue on. It's like,
And blue arms are not the same as Klingons.
thank the Lord for that. Folks, I agree, and I like your response. Is it okay to be tested by fellow believers? And I say that to you, if you really agree with what you just said, then start practicing it. Get people at some point in time, and they're going to come to us with resumes that look X and so. Guys, try the Spirit by the Spirit. Don't just take the resume. And by the way, Christians are good at showing you their resume. Typically, their resumes are from 100 years ago. The question sometimes gets to be when you see their resume. So yesterday, how did you walk with the Lord? Now, you get you didn't know you were going to ask me that. Thank you, but next. And when I say thank you, but next, you're fine to be a part of things, but don't try to tell us what it is that you are and how you can serve when you don't know how you served yesterday. Because that's a challenge for many, many believers, folks. Jesus was real at their salvation encounter 20, 30 years ago. But what have you done for me lately? Tell me about how Jesus walked with you earlier today. That's what we're challenging folks to be able to do. And that's the America we live in right now, folks. If Jesus was great 30 years ago, you need Jesus yesterday. Because 30 years ago is not that America today.
Well, the other side of that, it was in the legalistic world, they do what you're talking about, but in a detrimental way. And they may not look at your resume, but they may look at, where you were last week and on whose platform you were sitting and with whom you were speaking and who you might be listening to.
Sure.
And so now we're, you come into the church and I'm a big fan of Bill Osteen. He's the guy that really speaks to my heart. Well, we need to talk about whether or not you should be a Sunday school teacher.
Correct.
Or an associate pastor, blah, blah, blah.
Correct.
So we need to be, but the legalist will say, okay, he sat on the platform with Joel Osteen, so he's probably in agreement with him when he may be just being ecumenical.
And so we're almost suggesting something different that doesn't seem to happen with this exchange, which is it's okay to vet each other, guys. It's okay to do this thing that James talks about, which is not only confess your sins to one another, but ask each other how your conduct is. And that's a scary question for professed believers who've never been asked that question, because they're going to feel like it's too personal, it's too private, it's not your business. And here's the thing. This book says it is my business. My business, if we're all part of the body. I get to ask you that question. And you need to get comfortable exercising the muscle that says, let me tell you how my conduct was or how I blew it. Yes, sir.
Pretty cool thing about that is that at the school we have community groups every Wednesday, actually. And the good community group leaders ask questions of them every Wednesday. How was your week? What did you do?
It's a scary question, Dan. But you know what? You guys are sometimes better open to that than us old fogies who've been in church for many years. Because, and that's, when we talked earlier that young people want to tell you about their sex lives. They want to tell you that because young people want to feel valued. So when somebody asks a young person a question like, well, how your week was, some people feel like, I really belong here, I want to tell you. You don't want to ask an old adult that. It's none of your business. And then don't ask me what I make. Don't ask me how I spend it. That's none of your business.
Well, again, that's the older adult has a cultural background where this is not allowed. Where the younger people have a different kind of allowance, if you will, for that. And so that it's a cultural thing. There's literally in our town, their town.
Okay. So just because that culture exists doesn't mean that the young prophet who knew he was sent from God shouldn't have questioned what the old prophet, who was more established, what a reputation, was telling him.
Agreed.
Just because that's what the tradition and the culture said. Kind of make sense? Okay. Let me give you something stupid. This almost sounds crazy, but I like the point that Chris made earlier. There's an adage in show business. And here's the adage. Well, it used to exist. Is if you are in a band, if you're in a group, and you stay together for 10 years, the adage is this: you will become rich and famous. Do you know what? That's the adage. Because one of the things, have any of you seen the movie, Tom Hanks' movie, The Thing You Did? That Thing You Did. Okay. So you won't know this. Bands start out with 4, 5 people, sometimes 3. And they all like to sing. And then something happens where they become celebrated or they get notoriety. Okay? So that they get airplay, they get a contract, they get a huge amount of money, they start touring. And we discover something after that incident. You know what we discovered?
We don't like her.
We discovered that the players, the members of the group, are all members for different reasons. Even though they're all bound together by music, typically they have different reasons for being there. So if you've ever seen That Thing You Do, if you like music, you want to see anything about one-hit wonders, this is a fun little exploration to help you understand how bands work. So in That Thing You Do, we discover one guy is there, except his real focus is the military. So he's just there until he gets a chance to join the military. But the fact that he makes music is kind of neat, and he gets to travel and he gets to meet people. Another guy likes girls a whole lot. So he's there to meet girls. Okay? A third guy is there because he believes he is a musical genius. And as long as the musicality exposes and promotes his genius, he's going to be there. And then the fourth guy loves music so much, he just wants to see what the band is going to become. So he's there until the end. And ultimately, the group splits up because of all of these different reasons for them being there. So that's why it's important, folks, for us to vet people who say they want to walk with us. Because we may look a certain way and we may have Jesus in common, kind of, but we need to know that they love and they honor and revere Jesus the same way that we do. And it's perfectly fine to vet them to say, what does that mean? What would your day be like if you couldn't read the Bible? What would your day be like if you didn't have interactions with fellow Jesus lovers? It's okay to do that. And we don't do it enough, if at all. Because it's personal, private, none of your business. And it should be our business. And when you hear Daniel sort of saying, some of the successful leaders that we have in those community groups are the ones who ask this question, that's because it matters. And ultimately, if it's a tough question to go into at first, people understand that you care later on after this becomes a regular part of how you operate.
And again, the whole privacy matter when it comes to religion would go back to the Puritans again. They're a very private matter.
Correct.
And this, I'll say it, a very English matter.
Yes.
Yes. My religion is very, very personal, and it's not for you to know.
Yes.
That from an English background.
You're very right, because the Jewish background was not that. Your faith was very out loud. It was very in the open. The synagogue, or it bared all of your junk.
Right. And the house folded.
Correct.
At the door, mezuzah
Yes.
was there to testify
Correct.
what was going on inside.
Correct.
And if you don't know what that is, look it up.
There you go. Thank you. Appreciate you pulling that out there. So folks, because we live this way, because Steve and Daniel say this is our tradition, they're right about that. But it doesn't need to be that way, because that's not how we started. And the world that Jesus came into was a very different communal world than the world of Americans, because Americans are very individualized.
You think?
That's right. Next question. What's the next one up there? How much respect is due to an elder believer?
Well, we've been talking about it.
Well, I was just going to say, it's kind of dependent, isn't it?
On
How was your week? You know, what have you been doing lately? Does your resume of the past month indicate that you are still walking as you should?
So how many of you folks in this room have held an elder believer accountable to the point that Gene has just described?
That is really, really hard to do.
I appreciate that.
Because what's your words? Curmudgeon? they're sometimes elder, and I'm speaking in years, not necessarily maturity, and they're a bit crusty. They're not so approachable sometimes.
That should tell you something right there.
Yeah, Chris, but you know what? Even when it does tell us something like that, we don't hold them accountable.
No, I'm not saying, yeah.
We just kind of go, well, that's the way that they are. But here's the thing. It shouldn't be the way that they are, even that they are. So I can tell you, when our group of believers looked very different. I ran foul of some of our older believers. So this is probably one you don't know, but I'll tell you this one so you can appreciate it. When I first joined our body, I was trying to get to know people. So one of the things I would do is I would call everybody on the membership list. I would call them on the membership list once a week to see how they were doing. Especially the people that we didn't see. I would call up folks, and I would call them and I'd say, hey, this is Preston from Faith Baptist, and just reaching out to you to see how your week was. How's it going? So one of our elder people who believed that this was their job and that they did this exclusively discovered that I was doing this because someone had told them when they reached out to them eventually that they had just gotten a call from this guy, and I got laid out.
I'm sure. My job.
By the elder person who said, that's what I do. You shouldn't be doing it. Now, I see. This is my seat. I can tell you that older person and I had a very contentious relationship in this group of people for quite a long time. And I tried to be as respectful and tactful as I could, circumnavigating them to the point where I actually backed away from doing that in order to let them feel that territorially they were making an impact for the kingdom. Ultimately, that person decided to walk out of the church for a certain point in time. But that's a different story altogether. But folks, we don't hold our elders sometimes accountable to stuff because we don't feel like we should. We don't feel like we feel like we're disrespecting them if we don't.
We also feel like we have permission.
Correct. And we tell.
Yeah. When a Christian ages, there's something that you should see. Okay? and I've never seen it better displayed. Never liked it, Joe Smith. Here's a man who was a real instructor. This dude did net push-ups. This guy, and you did not want to cross this guy. And he started out crusty. Okay? But as he got older, he had such a sweet spot. And that's what should happen.
I agree. I agree, brother. And that gets easier when we do what Daniel just described as okay in his environment. When we're comfortable asking about our conduct, it gets easier for you to meddle and for me not to get offended by you meddling. Because here's why. When young Daniel comes and says, Preston, how's your conduct? And instead of me going, who are you to ask me, you young buck? And I say, dude, thank you for asking. I really struggled with this week. Here's a couple things that happened. I get to teach him, and he cares. So when he's praying, he's caring about the old funny dummy. Because I cared enough to answer his question that was asked for the right reason. We don't do that in this community the right way. And thus, we sometimes give, not respect, we don't give the right vetting to our elders to the point where they can be practicing behaviors that are not Christ-like, where they have undue influence in our group of people because no one ever says it's not okay. And this young guy, this young prophet, should have been able to say, dude, if he had had a little talk with Jesus, he should have been able to come back and say, look, man, I don't know what you were trying to prove. Look, this is not the outcome, but this is what could have happened. I don't know what you were trying to prove. I don't know why you were trying to delude me. And I came to see you in part because you were this guy. I'm so sorely disappointed in you. And please be glad I didn't ask the Lord to blow you up on account of what you just did, but I need to be on my way. So I appreciate the encounter. But brother, you can't operate this way. And then he would have gone on his way. That doesn't happen. Because of the potential respect, because of the potential not going and vetting this news that he has in his relationship, he thinks in some ways the relationship the older prophet has is stronger than his relationship. That's on display here. Can you see it? Next question. Folks, appreciate your response. What are the limits of respect? Of respecting elders or longtime believers? And I brought an answer for you there. I love that Gene regularly goes to this one. Be a Berean. If you see people operating outside of the scriptural territories of what it should look like as we grow, then you need to hold that person and say, excuse me, nope, that doesn't look right. Now, I will tell you, you will get a lot of older people smarting when they've been owning their bench for a lot of years. You guys remember how contentious it was with some of the older people who used to hang out with us. And so what the older people did is they would go to where they would get coddled. They would go to where they would get softer presentations and not the things that would hold them accountable.
There's go where they get respect and what they did years ago.
And you guys saw what that looks like. So some of this study is one that's not lost on you because you lived through some of this. The other one is try the Spirit. Paul says, try the Spirit by the Spirit. Here's the thing. You don't have to pull a genie out of a bottle. You are, if you possess, you have the living Holy Spirit as a part of you. And you need to ask questions that the Holy Spirit in you says, quite right. And then what you do is politely, tactfully, diplomatically figure out how to back away from that relationship because it's not going to be a positive one for you. But at the same time, how to figure out how to speak or how to operate in their lives to be able to help them to grow as much as they'll allow themselves to grow. That is so daunting. That's why we kind of let old people be old people.
Well, and I liked your term, long time believer. That's not necessarily indicating growth.
Absolutely.
There's what happens is they've not been a Christian for 30 years. They've been a Christian for 1 year, 30 times over.
Oh, smokes.
And so they're not
You
growing.
got kicked out of churches.
Yeah, I know. They're not maturing. They've not progressed beyond forgiveness. Likewise, they've not progressed beyond what spoon feeding they've gotten used to. And so they're not digging on their own. they're not finding those nuggets themselves. And so there isn't any maturity, just long kindness.
I love when you wake up. I love when you hate coming in and then you can't stifle you. I love that. Folks, look, the bonus of this particular group is you were in the presence of a lot of spiritual infants who had been saved for 30, 40, and 50 years. And it's just like Gene described. It's almost as though they were believers for a year and they were saved over and over again every time they heard the sermon. But they had grown not an ounce at all. And I'm going to suggest to you very strongly that this old prophet was successful, but we don't know when his last success was. But right now, he's not the guy called on to give this important message to the new and upcoming king. And so this guy's testimony may be from years and years and years ago. And he's watching this new kid on the scene, and he's going to put him to the test. And in many ways, and I said this last week, his reasons were selfish. And it gets played out when we see the scenario with the dead guy, the donkey, and the lion. He knows, if he didn't know from the telling of the withered hand, he knows because he's the guy who disrupts the plans, and here's the consequence played out. He knows this man was from God. Next question.
There's almost, and I love the way you make us think like this, okay? There's almost a sense in which the old prophet has heard very little from Yahweh, and so there's a drifting that's happened, and then this young fella comes along, and it's like, oh, I've almost forgotten about Yahweh God, and I wonder if he's still operating the way he used to. And so now there's, again, this testing of Yahweh God saying, let me see God is who he really used to be. And so he tests the prophet, but he also tests God. And when he hears about the, not the lion, the witch, and wardrobe, but the lion, the donkey, and man, on the road, then he goes, oh, Yahweh is still Yahweh.
Yep. Okay. I see a lot of that in this. And it's all over these verses for me when I read that. That's exactly what I see. Is this old guy wants to figure out if he's still connected, but he also wants to figure out who this young guy is. Is he for real? And guys, here's the other thing. I think that there were probably simpler ways for him to go about proving this guy's pedigree. This is a huge, need I say it, inconvenience for the young guy. Yeah, they really is. Another question. I think this is the final question. Is it okay to have heroes?
Depends on who they are.
Strongly to you that the young man revered who this guy was, because I believe that since he was an older prophet and the young guy was called into being a prophet, he was a man of renown. Even if he hadn't done anything.
Be careful of your hair.
What?
They could lead you astray. Well, they can lead you astray, and they could be what you admired them for 10 years ago may not be where they stand today. And so you have to be willing to say, yeah, no, thank you.
They were one.
Sometimes it's hard. Yeah, they're the one hit wonder. I mean, because your heroes as a kid are probably going to be different than your heroes as an adult, more than likely, unless you're stuck in the Marvel universe, and then they're always your heroes. Just saying. But you should look up to people for the right reasons, because you can learn from them. But then if something happens and you're no longer learning from them, you got to look at it and go, wait, what happened?
Yes.
And then depending on who they are and where the role is in your life, you talk to them if you can. If there's somebody in some celebrity circle you can't, sometimes you just got to say, I'm done with you. I'm done with you. So
I'm sure you're not worshiping them.
yes.
So that's hard too, folks. But that's almost why we started a little bit with David Archuleta. our young people can really get caught up in, guys, some of us, when we think about being younger, some of our early heroes were musicians.
Mhm.
We didn't knew very little about their lives. We knew their music, and when we learned about their lives, we were kind of like, oh man. Now, some of their lives and their lifestyles now are just crazy town. But when we were younger, it's really easy to imprint on those folks. And that's why partly the David Archuleta discussion is it's real easy for you to kind of idolize this guy. He's a 30-year-old guy, comes from a Brady-like family from the Mormons, has done all and operated in ways that are commendable. And now we find out today that his agenda is quite different, perhaps, than the agenda of those who profess and possess Jesus today.
Sometimes we have our heroes fall in a way that we don't expect.
Correct.
And bear with me. I was, as a young person, a big fan of Sherlock Holmes. Okay? Here was a brilliant mind, a deductive reasoning that was just, par excellence. And I love the way he was able to sift through the information and get to the truth. And then I began to read Conan Doyle's accounts of him more thoroughly and got beyond the Red-Headed League, etc. And we got to his needle usage, his heroin, his and it was like, oh man, this guy that I've revered for so long, who by the way is fictitious, he's not real.
What?
Okay. You find out that he's got these weaknesses, and it's like, oh man, my hero has fallen.
Right.
And that happens. You have to be careful how that fall affects us. I mean, I don't have many heroes. Okay. If I were walking down the street and Chuck Norris was walking the other direction, I don't know that I'd cross the street to come.
Yes, you would.
I'm just saying.
Yes, you would.
I don't.
Yeah, you would.
Anyway. Well, but
Kathy, he would.
LeBron James, I wouldn't even recognize him.
I'd recognize him and just go the opposite.
No,
He's pretty hard to miss.
yeah, okay, if you say so.
That's a big man.
Well, Shaquille O'Neal, I would recognize him. He's been on every commercial in the world. But, keep on going. I don't have a lot of heroes, so I don't experience that hero fall very often. But it does happen.
Yeah, and guys, that's why I try to have you aware of some of the news, kind of like Steve does, when you see these Christian leaders who have a huge following of people who imprint on them, who admire them and revere them as heroes, and then they're crestfallen when something occurs that's awry about their life. And so when I see is it okay to have heroes, I'm in the Gene and the Sarah camp, which is this. Imitate me as I imitate you.
Amen. Right.
Follow me as I follow Jesus. When you get off course with that, I have to disembark from my hero train with you. And see, this young guy could have done that. The young guy, when he heard the pronouncement from the old guy, needed to go to the source and say, Lord, is he telling me what's right? And he would have gotten a message that says, and then he would have gone back to the other guy and said, dude, no, can't do that. So guess what? Admired what you did, enjoyed the papers and the clippings from yesteryear, but I got to be stepping, brother. Can't hang out with you. Can't go back even the way it came. And it would have been a done deal. But very likely there was a reverence, there was a respect, this guy used to talk with the Lord, so he's obviously gotten a message that supersedes my own. And he just went for it. Yeah, Chris.
You remember on MASH when Radar had to have his appendix out or something, and Hawkeye had been in surgery forever, had been drinking after surgery, and then he had to go do the surgery.
Yep.
And he was not completely sober when he did it, but everything turned out fine. But then Radar didn't want to speak to him because he was so hurt. And they told Hawkeye, he worships you. You were everything, and he feels you let him down. Mm-hmm. That whole drop in you're a real person. He told him, he's like, I'm not perfect. You can't, put that on me that, I have to be perfect for you.
And you're right about that, but the key as a believer sometimes gets to be this. We have to do what Daniel reminded us about. We have to talk about all the yuck that makes me up, in addition to sometimes those things that are the bright lights that you see me mostly do. And what that does, then it humanizes me perhaps in the relationship that I have with Daniel, so that what happens is when I get caught pilfering at the Food Lion, Daniel goes, but at the same time realizes, didn't know guys like to pilfer chicken from Food Lion.
Sure.
But may not be a surprise because I'm a failed human who in many ways relies on Jesus to keep me on the straight, and I don't brag that I'm better than anybody else is. Now, we still don't do that well, either from the folks that are prominent or from the folks who are who make up the other parts of the body. But we got to get better. So, thank you guys for hanging in there. Young people, thank you for hanging in to that socio-cultural poli-sci stuff.
How about I like that stuff?
Well, and that's why I appreciate you being here to sort of bridge the gap to let folks know, let our younger people know. Once you get a grasp on it, it gets easier to do some of the stuff. Look, in a lot of ways, you're one of my heroes. The fact that you can walk into a school and go, "Excuse me, this is the wrong environment," and then you go, I'm gonna live this out until I can make a change. And then you make a change and go, yes, I think this is the environment that I want to be in. And there's still a lot wrong here, but I'm gonna find the places that are best to hang out. You know what kind of courage it takes to do that?
That's huge.
There's us in this room that can't do that. So I spend a lot of time making believe that Daniel Jenkins is my son, to say, this is how you do this. This is how you do this. And so it doesn't have to be just younger person to older person. It can be there are traits that are admirable in some of the young folks because they're in some ways foundational in ways that we don't know how to do. So kudos, and enjoy hearing your story and recognize you're going to make some stupid decisions along the way. You know what? But you're in your 20s. And then you're going to make more stupid decisions. Why? Because you're going to be in your 30s.
I don't think I'm never going to stop making stupid decisions.
That's right. You just don't want your parents boo and going, "Oh, I'm sorry, you never had him." You don't want that. Sure. But we make less because we're parents.
No, that's not true.
Question our
She doesn't
We'll do it anyways.
And that's the challenge, is that our kids don't stay our kids the same way they eventually become adults who want to look back and they understand your life decisions differently, and now they have a different perspective and they want to ask, why did that happen? Parents have got to be ready to deal with that, but once they get to be adults and they understand life, sex, culture differently, and Steve Jenkins, who's a giant in both of his boys' eyes, may not be the giant the same way because now they're in the big old rooms.
I never seen you right.
That was great.
Steve Jenkins could kick both of the boys and probably most of us in this room's butt when he put his arms out like this and let you swing on them like a monkey. That's real time. And there was a time when he could have caught you.
Oh, he could. He's fast. Now his knees are bad.
Yeah. He's making fun of that. See what happens. Oh, sure. And then there's always the misery thing that can happen to you. Have you guys seen the movie Misery? Oh, if I want to catch up with you, I'll show you how I'll catch up with you. I'm going to do what's called hobbling you, and I will leave that out, kind of like Brother James thing. Look up hobbling, and
My knee hurt. My legs.
my whole body hurt because you ain't gonna walk right again. So we've been through Stephen King. Any comments? Any other stuff? We're on our new lesson next week. I'll put some final thoughts in, and I'll have Sister Sarah put them in. Does this kind of make sense? Is hero worship going wrong?
Yeah.
This passage of scripture that seems to be something to pass over has a whole lot of message potentially for us.